5, 7, 1, 2, 3.
Hi, this is Pods and Ends, the junk drawer of pop culture and geek podcasts.
It's Pods and Ends time once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming in. We really appreciate your business. With us tonight in the Pods and Ends studio here in sunny California is yours truly, Brian, and
Shelby.
And joining us across the pond over there in merry old England, we have
Sophie.
And I'm Phil.
Yeah, he is. And he's here courtesy of the Pinky Blinders.
Oh my gosh.
Actually dead.
We're not talking about that though.
Yeah, no, we're not. Don't get your hopes up. So today we're gonna forego our segments. We're gonna dive head first into this kind of idea of what started this podcast, and that is the idea that we all like more than just Star Wars. As a matter of fact, I don't even really like Star Wars anymore.
Okay, I know you wanted to say that.
We'll get to that later. So yeah, the people can have multiple fandoms. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one thing. But the question we're going to talk about today is why we choose the fandoms we choose. So to start us out, there are obviously several fandoms to pick from nowadays. So what makes an IP appealing to you? What makes you decide to give it your time and attention? Soph, let's start with you.
I like something that's got generally a lot of content around it, because I do like to immerse myself in things, and if it's just one film or one book or something, then that kind of stresses me out a bit, because I'm like, well, what if I really like it and then that's it? So generally, if I know that a film is based, so Mortal Engines is a really good example of it piques my interest because it's a film that I can go and see, but then it's like, whoa, but there are 5 books out there as well that I can then get immersed into as well if I want to. So that's a big tick for me, is if it's if there's a lot of potential content for me to be able to dive into, then I'm going to be interested.
See, that's kind of funny because I'm pretty sure Shelby is the opposite.
I was about to say
she
that.
She gets incredibly intimidated when there's too much.
Yeah, if I see something has a lot of stuff behind it, I'm like, that's a really big commitment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I really want to get into that. I'm good. But if it's like this is a brand new story, and maybe there's like a couple books out or something, I'm into it.
It's easier to give something a try, and then if you don't like it, you don't have to feel like compelled to move forward. But we'll get to that actually in a little bit. So, Phil, what about you? What makes you want to start into an IP?
Friends. Like, if they say to me, this is good, give it a go. And then if it hooks me, that's enough for me. I don't particularly have anything that makes me, reading books, or if there's too much content or not enough content, it doesn't really bother me too much. Just if someone says to me, this is good, give it a go, then I give it a go. And then if there's more to look into it, then I do. But yeah.
There's nothing that particularly piques your interest other than like recommendations. There's nothing you will always like, oh, that's sci-fi. I always give sci-fi things a shot or something like that.
No, mine would, if it was anything, it would be like heist, sort of those sort of things.
Okay.
Anything to do with maybe like a bit of made up crime or trickery and that sort of stuff, fraudulent behaviour. Anything like that. If I ever see that come on a trailer on Netflix or someone talks about that, I always look into it because that's something that I particularly enjoy. But yeah.
Yeah, you are a lot more broad than me. I've got to say I'm quite pigeonholed into a fantasy sci-fi. It was always originally for me very much fantasy, and then in the last few years I've kind of gone into much more sci-fi. But yeah, you are actually much more broad, and you're probably the one who would pull me out of my pigeonhole and be like, we should try this, we should try X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm probably the one that convinces you to get into something like Game of Thrones. Was me pulling you towards that and being like, give it a go, don't worry, it's not too out there and magic-y. I was like, it's a lot of backstabbing and stuff. And then massive dragons came along, but that's fine.
That's not like fancy, those dragons are real because they live in Wales.
Yeah, I think you're not mega into high fantasy. Well, no, again, like Lord of the Rings and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just a lot more broad than me, I think, actually.
Yeah, so for me, it's basically sports, and if it's a sport, I watch it, and like my interest, Soph will be there, and she'll be like, "Oh, let's watch this sci-fi program," and I'd be sooner sit there and watch sports sometimes. So that's me, really.
I think sports is an IP. I mean, we tend to think of pop culture and geekdom, but I mean, sports have been something that's pop culture throughout the eons of human existence. I'm sure cavemen threw rocks at each other, and then someone bet on which one would get knocked out first. I don't know.
Because even today, I've watched some football, some basketball, some cricket, and some boxing.
And I read
off
like
it.
half a book in that time.
So yeah, if it's sports, I like it as well.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. What about you, Shelby? What makes you want to watch something, or get into something for any kind of medium?
I mean, I tried to think, and I was like, is it that it's a specific genre? I don't think, because I have lots of different genres I'm into. I think if it just is broadcast to me as something that looks like a good story, then I'm into it, especially if other people that I trust their taste say that they like it. So I guess just like Phil saying Friends, if friends are recommending it, then, oh, that's cool. I could watch this and then talk to them about it. Mm-hmm. So it
like
has,
on a podcast or something.
On a podcast or something.
What a novel idea.
I have the same thing though, because I have like various staff at work, and they say, "Oh, you should give this a go. Have you watched this?" Or 2 or 3 of them are talking about a particular Netflix program they watch. It's nice if I can sit down for an hour, watch it, catch up with it, and then it's another thing that I got to interact with them. And then, like the Netflix series You. I didn't think it was going to be my sort of thing, but in actual fact, it just hooked me quite well, and I enjoyed it. And it was nice being able to interact with people at work and discuss what was going on and the ins and outs of it. So,
yeah, there's nothing more alienating at work when everybody's watching a program and you're not at all. I mean, over here it's like the Bake Off, isn't it? You had like everybody watching the Bake Off, and then they're like talking, and you just can't participate in that because you don't watch it. And some of it's like fine, I'm happy to not be, if it's really not going to be my cup of tea. But like you say, there is something about that whole, the kind of water cooler chat and stuff like that.
Kind of like when all they talk about is sports, and you're like, well, I have literally nothing to contribute to this conversation.
Yeah, I was going to actually bring that up. In the car today, Shelby was complaining about how March Madness brackets are going to start showing up, and how she wants to be included, but she also doesn't want to have to do it. So it's like it's a weird catch-22 situation. And I understand that's kind of I don't know. Sometimes I feel that way about my students. They're all talking about Riverdale, and I feel like I should go watch Riverdale. But at the same time, I don't really want to go watch Riverdale.
Yeah.
So,
like, I don't want to pay $10 and make up a bracket, and because I don't know what I'm doing. 2, I don't care. 3,
honestly, though,
I'm not
most of the time,
it.
the winner has no idea what they're doing. So
yeah, that's true.
That is playing in your favor,
right? But it's also, I get that it's a way to socially interact with people, and I know I should do it, but I just don't care.
I think actually the stupidest way I got into something was actually Firefly, because I hadn't seen Firefly until I watched The Big Bang Theory, and this was sort of when it was just, I think it was back when season 1 of The Big Bang Theory came out, and obviously they reference it so much, and I can just remember sitting there and thinking, well, they like all the same stuff that they reference all the stuff, even though they're totally fictional characters. I was like, they like all the same stuff I do, so I'll probably like Firefly, and that is literally how I got into Firefly. Like, but for The Big Bang Theory,
that's hilarious.
I never would have watched it. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing.
These stereotypical archetypes are basically me.
Yeah!
I should do what they do.
Exactly. So it worked somehow.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think recommendations is, especially nowadays, and with the ease of things and the ease with which you can get recommendations. I mean, online, you could send out a tweet if you were on social media. I know you're not, Phil, but hypothetically, you could send out a tweet and be like, looking for a new show, and random people would give you 15 recommendations. So there's no shortage of that kind of input. And again, the availability of so many things with Netflix, Hulu, Prime, whatever, you can get a hold of almost anything. You don't have to run down to Blockbuster and try to find it on the shelf or anything.
I think that's it. I think, especially in the UK, is like Prime is taking a little bit of a hold, but Netflix has the market 100%. So I can talk to anyone at work and they all have Netflix. So it's easy for me to go, oh, have you seen this Netflix original? Which, like, we have basically terrestrial TV, which is BBC and ITV and a couple of other channels. And then we have Sky, which you pay for, or you have BT, which you then pay for. Or Virgin, which is all different like types of cable, basically, or satellite telly. And then, but everyone has Netflix. So it's easy to go, oh, have you seen this on Netflix? And everyone has Netflix. They go, oh, yeah. And then they give it a go. And it's a regular conversation at work of, oh, has anyone got any decent recommendations for Netflix? And it's on a notice board at work if someone's seen something good. It's a weird way of, it's a weird change in maybe even the last year of how people are communicating about what they're watching to, oh, it's on Netflix. Everyone has Netflix. Netflix is taking over the world. And they're putting out so many of their own original programs now that
so many
and they're high quality though.
I was about to say that they're good as well.
Good budget, they're well budgeted programs that are well produced and well directed, and there's a couple of flops, but the majority of them are very, very good.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how just the amount of content they are just spewing up, and they don't have to advertise it at all.
No,
they just put it there and people find it, and then again, like we're saying, they tell other people, and that's all they need to do. Because again, like you said, most people, like vast majority of people, have Netflix or have access to it through someone else, legally or not. I don't know, not here for that conversation, but it's a crazy world we live in right now. But anyway, now that we know how we come to our various fandoms, IPs, whatever you want to call them, what does it take to keep your attention? So now you're hooked on something, or you've found something, and what makes it something you want to either continue watching, like the series, a movie, or whatever? What keeps you into the fandom, as it were? Soph.
Okay, the key one for me is I mean, obviously, I feel like we're all going to say, a compelling story and strong characters and things like that.
A good beat, and you can get dance to it.
Yeah.
Good bop.
But, right? Needs a good bop. For me, it has to be, I don't want to use the term strong, but I'm going to say, like, decent female characters for me is a really big, if a program is very, very male dominated, I will find myself struggling to stay interested in it. I like to have and I know I appreciate some of them, it doesn't always, but like Narcos, like this, it's mostly, I still watched that and I was really, really into it. I didn't write off the series because of it, but there are a lot that if it doesn't have sort of decent female characters, and like I said, I don't want to say strong because women can be weak and bad and lying and things like that without sort of, but yeah, that kind of a bit of diversity. I just think otherwise it doesn't really keep me hooked, because I do kind of gravitate towards them and root for other female characters on screen and stuff like that. So yeah, for me, I need a some decent female characters in there to keep my attention.
Well, that makes sense with the whole idea of representation. It's easier to enjoy something you can see yourself in. So
I feel the same way, Soph.
Yeah.
Is that really all it takes, though?
No. But it's something that is necessary a lot of times to keep me interested.
Yeah, I notice it if it's not there, and it's then got to be pretty decent to keep it. Like I said, something like Narcos is probably a good example of. Well, even like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones could easily have lent towards, well, I'm setting this in a society where women just didn't have the kind of power and responsibility, but they found ways to elevate the female characters to go beyond that. So, yeah, if they're not there, there has to be a really good reason why they're not there. Otherwise, it's just like, well, But yeah, like you say, it's not the only reason. But that's just a key one for me.
What about you, Shel? Are you in line with Soph, or do you have any of your own?
Well, I mean, I'm in line with Soph as well, as if you're talking about continual talking about something, and there has to be more content coming out. The frequency at which that happens is really up in the air, but which is strange because I also really enjoy things that get tied up in a little bow and like that's the end. So what keeps my attention on something is if it really stands out, if it really tells a story or a perspective that you don't see very often. That's what keeps it in the forefront. Like Annihilation, I still think about Annihilation all the time because it was so different. I still think about Blade Runner 2049.
That movie was so good.
Because it was so good. They both have potential for future movies, but I'm also okay with what they are right now. So yeah, something like that. That is a standout film or book or comic or whatever.
Okay, that makes sense. Something that's sort of in its own lane, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's always eye-catching. What about you, Phil? What do you need? Sports to be involved?
Well, yeah. I'm a bit more vulgar, I like a bit of sex, bad language, and violence.
Attaboy.
I just think it brings a bit more realism when you're watching kind of, I don't know, I'll come back to that point in a minute, but you got, for example, like Suits, and I like a bit of variety, because Suits is very much, you have the two characters, they get in trouble, they sort themselves out, and they get out of trouble. And then the next episode, they get themselves in trouble, they sort themselves out of trouble, done. And that's fine for 2 seasons. And then you think they need to change it, they need to make this more interesting. And then I just completely lost my interest because it just got a bit boring. And I was like, well, it's just going to be the same. They're going to get in trouble and they're going to fix it. That might be because there's already 8 series of it and you don't know what's coming next and you're not on the edge of your seat wondering. But yeah, I just like a bit of bad language and violence and sex in my programs. It's very... I don't know why.
I can get behind that.
Sparks the adrenaline, I think.
Well,
Makes me... It's things that I don't like. Don't get me wrong, I do two of those things in my life, but I don't do violence.
Cursing and violence.
But I just think that it's that little thrill, and it's the like, that's harsh, or that's a bit mean, and then sex is sex, isn't it? So
it sure is.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with that in the sense that it's that, yeah, like you say, it is exciting. Something can, I think for us, certainly, if we're watching it, we're definitely more into things that are potentially less tame. You can probably guess that from some of our history of, don't get me wrong, we do like the stuff that doesn't have that in, Star Wars and stuff, but you did gravitate towards the grittier side of Star Wars in terms of Rogue One being your favourite, and then the other stuff we watch, like you say, Game of Thrones, Peaky Blinders and stuff, we're there for the shock, aren't we?
You've even got, like, I'm a particular fan of Firefly as well, and that has got blatant violence. He just shoots them in the face.
You don't see it.
The bad language is in Chinese, but you understand exactly what he's saying. And their like person who brings some dignity to the ship is basically a prostitute.
Yeah.
So it's all those 3 elements. They're done in a much more subtle way than Game of Thrones.
Yes.
But they are still there, and it's still things that are like, it's more true to life itself rather than...
We don't live in a
world where we hold hands.
Right, yeah. If everything's too cleaned up, it doesn't seem believable or like comparable to anything we're used to. I think to continually bring up Star Wars, part of the reason it was so popular as a sci-fi genre, people have said this, it's not like new information, but you had Star Trek and things like that were like always very clean. And then you have Star Wars that looks lived in. It made it more like believable. You could see it as being an actual place, where Star Trek, they look like they're on a fake ship.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like it just does.
And you have to like bump start the Falcon basically because it's a bit, it's that, it's that lived in universe vibe.
And I'm not advocating that 10 or 12-year-olds should be watching the programs I watch.
Because,
I'm just saying that I'm at the age where I can understand that I shouldn't go around and stab someone because they've upset me, but I do understand that there is parts of life, and in the olden days, that those sort of things happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I think, there's something to that calling to our more baser human instincts, our carnal selves, so to speak. And it's an outlet for those kind of things. You get it out of your system, so you don't, if all you do is watch My Little Pony all day long, you may end up stabbing someone because you don't get that out of your system. Just saying. I don't think that's true. Don't all the bronies out there, don't get mad. I was only joking. My Little Pony's fine. So to move on, kind of to something that we've almost touched on before, mostly Shelby talking about Annihilation. So what makes you want more from a particular IP or fandom versus feeling done when the given content is over? Like, Annihilation is an interesting idea because you could watch the one movie that's available right now and be done with it, but it's based on 3 novels. So there's the potential that there could be more movies, but there's also the obvious availability of more content right now. But what makes you, since you said you were into it, are you interested in the books and furthering the development of the story, or do you just really like it and going to leave it alone for what it is?
Well, I think it kind of comes back to the fact that nowadays movies that are about books don't follow the books. So if I were going to read the books, I know in my mind that it's probably a similar but different story, and I may like it as much or may not. I could leave it how it is, and I almost think that that's what makes me like something, is that you could either leave it how it is or continue watching, and you would be happy with either one. Because a movie shouldn't be dependent on the next movie to make it a good movie.
Ooh, that's a good point. Unless, I don't know, I can't think of a good, there's no unless. That's a good point. Even if it's parts of a series, they should be able to stand on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like how the middle Lord of the Rings movie is the best one, and it has a beginning and an end that you don't need to see because it's the best one.
The first one's the best one.
No, it's not. You're wrong.
Godfather 2.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That stands on its own, but with the other movies, it's even heightened further.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that should be the way series go, honestly. All things being perfect, every movie of a series should be good by itself, but should, as a whole, be that much better.
Do you not think that nowadays that they, well, we discussed this before, Back to the Future, they made the first one and it was popular, it made lots of money, so then they thought, oh, okay, we'll make another one because of the popularity, where nowadays they go in and sort of, we've got this project, we're going to do 4 movies, we're going to do 5 movies, we're going to do this. So there's always the potential that the middle movie might be weaker because they're building up to the final finale.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, that they're not made as single entities themselves. They're made as part of the greater story.
Yeah.
Right. Having the ambiguity of whether or not you're going to be able to make a next one, I think forces a better output.
That's a pretty good point, except that the second Lord of the Rings movie is still the best.
Oh my gosh.
And they were all filmed at the same time, knowing there were going to be 3. Oh, okay. No, that does make a really good point, though, especially with so many things coming up. These, there's going to be, 3 or 4 more Avatar movies. First of all, why? Second of all...
when?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Who's going to watch him, honestly?
I think maybe next year the first one's supposed to come out. I don't know. I haven't kept up with it because I literally couldn't care less. But that might be one of those things where if they're doing more than one, you might end the first movie on a cliffhanger, and then that's going to make people like Shelby want to murder.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one will be all rising action or something. Mm-hmm. And so you're let down again. So yeah, it's a weird state of creation, I guess we're kind of left in here, because
you've kind of got we talked Lord of the Rings, yeah. It was a complete story that they changed into a film, fine. Mm-hmm. But The Hobbit was a complete story that they changed into a film, but they stretched it out, and it was no good. Yeah, let's just say it was no good, was it? It was visually poor. And
there were elements that were great.
But you
I
wouldn't want
will-
to just watch the last movie by itself, where we could quite easily watch The Two Towers tomorrow afternoon and not watch the movie before, not watch the movie after, and still 1,000% enjoy it. Where we couldn't watch the middle movie of The Hobbit and enjoy it because
Yeah,
it'd be
but
like,
then the thing is, these are all the example. There is a difference between, like you say, if we compare the Lord of the Rings trilogy to, say, the first Star Wars trilogy, that the big difference there is that, you've got films that are based on books, and series of books have a tendency to, authors have a tendency to know kind of how many. J.K. Rowling, she knew there were going to be 7 books from the minute she wrote the first word of. I think the first thing she wrote was probably the very last chapter almost. So she knew how long, where compare that to George Lucas, where he's like, this film might not get made, I don't even know. So he did Star Wars, and then he then goes on to Empire, and then, and there are examples of you could just stick Empire Strikes Back on and be absolutely fine. And that is probably an example of one that doesn't have a weaker middle chapter, because that at the time was so groundbreaking of like, well, actually what I'm going to do instead is have the bad guys win this film. Which, that's the end of my point.
Well said. What do you think about, we talked about Blade Runner 2049. What do you think about this kind of newer trend of bringing things back that have been over for so long? I mean, it's kind of what Star Wars has done twice now, really. But do you enjoy that idea of a new chapter and something that you thought was closed?
yes and no. Ghostbusters, I quite like the remake of that.
That was really funny. But that was so different, wasn't it? That was, we'll take the original concept and flip it completely and have forward. They did not completely alter it. The story was still the same, but it was a new way to look at it, which was really good fun. But like, and again, if I think Star Wars is a good example because we all have enjoyed Star Wars, and the reason why I always want more content from Star Wars is, for me, there's so much possibility in the universe. Because you're talking about a galaxy, so you could pick a planet no one's ever heard of and just run with it from there. So if they were to announce tomorrow, that's it, after episode 9, there is no more Star Wars, we're done, I would feel very disappointed because I feel there's so many opportunities that they just haven't explored yet. You look at, like, going back to the Old Republic and those kind of eras, there's just so much that you could do where... something like Harry Potter, that was a very, very contained story. But again, it spoke of a greater wizarding world. So I think that's where it then becomes really compelling for me. So if there was lots of possibilities in something way back when, I don't know, Alien or something like that, that could easily be brought forward to this time and redone. But then I don't know, because on the flip side then you've got something which, like Back to the Future, which, like you say, is arguably fine. Does it need a remake?
What do you mean it's arguably fine? It's
Well-
one of the greatest movies ever made.
Agreed. 100% agreed.
Spielberg.
But if they were to announce tomorrow, we're making Indiana Jones, but we're recasting Indy, and we're going to just do that all again. Like, how
Haven't they already said they're doing that?
Yeah.
I didn't know have they? I'm not surprised.
Isn't
I
it
think
the,
that-
isn't
I
it
think
the
they're making
iconicness
one
of the
more.
film?
Hmm.
Like, I have a special place in my heart for Back to the Future and don't really want to see a remake of it,
Agreed.
where you probably wouldn't mind because
No.
you don't feel for it that much. But then something like Jaws, would you want a remake of Jaws?
Oh,
We already got that.
We've
It's
got
called
The
The
Meg.
Meg.
Well, this
No,
is...
but I absolutely agree with you. If they remade Jaws, that would be stupid.
Yeah.
Like, Jaws is almost perfect as it is.
Well, there's something about it too because it was done in a time when we didn't have the technology that we have now.
Yeah.
I think that's what.
Well, and I think that would ruin it.
Yeah, it's.
You would get the Meg. Like,
Yeah.
if Jaws wasn't a movie, it would never have gotten made, and we'd just have the Meg.
And it's kind of,
And you
that's
wouldn't
what I
have
think.
Shallow Waters. You wouldn't have.
It's very individual that, Sophie, you would never want to see Harry Potter remade, would you? You like the films for what they are, and you would never want to see, we're going to remake it.
And recast. And,
Recast
yeah.
them. You wouldn't want that, would
No.
you? Where another person on the other side of the planet wouldn't care because they don't feel that much for the movies. So,
Or someone who hasn't even been born yet, and in 10 years' time will go,
exactly.
oh, those old Harry Potter films, yeah, what will that look like now?
Because even the first film looks really dated now.
Yeah.
Well, Blade Runner. Going back to Blade
Yeah.
Runner, the first Blade Runner felt pretty tied up, and very standalone, and I was so interested. I mean, and that one isn't like a huge world that was built. It's just the world. And now with 2049, it was an incredible movie.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the best movies I've seen.
It was
in the last
it was a
10
very
years.
good movie, and at the same time, it was also visually it was shot very well. So it basically they just did a really good job at making that movie. But I think so many movies they do remake just don't hit the same notes as that did, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Oh, we're just going to do the first Blade Runner movie over again, was it? It was.
Okay, but then also, if we're talking about kind of like remakes and things like that, when it's not just about remakes, is it? It's about opening that universe back up again. So, do you therefore think that they should have, when Disney bought Star Wars and said we're going to make new Star Wars stories, was that a good thing, or should it have just stopped with the original 6 movies?
3 movies.
Oh, you're going back even further than that. Stop the prequels as well. Because that is arguably
I want them to
some.
have made Rogue One and then maybe decided to quit.
Because we're talking about how beloved the Harry Potter films are to me and stuff like that, but that is the same for people who were the first to experience those Star Wars films.
Yeah.
And is that how they're feeling at the new franchise? And yet for us,
1,000% it is.
yeah, for me it's exciting because I wasn't there in the original. I was there for the prequels, but for me it's just like, but it's new Star Wars, so that's always exciting for me at the moment.
And because there's more than 3 lines for a lady in the film.
Exactly. That's what we say though, isn't it? Of stuff that was back then that was sort of normal. Now we're kind of, smashing that glass ceiling.
Yeah.
It really just comes down to making good stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
mean,
I think we can unanimously agree that it's mostly about the story. But I think as far as remakes go, 9 times out of 10, I would rather the story continue or be left alone.
Or say something happened and they didn't really get to finish the first one the way they wanted to. So like take Fruits Basket for an example. It never really got fleshed out. And so they're doing a remake, not a continuation. And I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I okay, that's a good example because you're starting over so that you can carry it forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to butt something new up against something that's
Right.
old and
Trying
might
to make it
not
work.
fit.
Exactly. Because it deviated from the actual story.
Right. That's a good point, actually.
Then having said that, if they were to announce tomorrow that they picked up Firefly and that they were going to do the exact same thing to Firefly, I don't think I'd be very happy.
No, that needs to be continued. Actually, I wish they would say, JK on Serenity, Firefly is going to take over where the series left, because I did not like that movie.
And that's sort of an example of kind of not doing it quite right.
Well, yeah,
and in
they
a way
changed
should it have
the
been-
way they filmed it. They changed the lighting. They changed lots
Yeah.
of aspects of it.
Yeah.
And the series was so beloved that it was never going to live up to what
Yeah.
to the TV series.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's
But-
like one of those things, someone said putting a bow on it. I think it was Shelby. And no, Firefly didn't have a bow on it. And then they took Serenity and instead of putting a bow on it, they like clamped it down and they bent it so that it was over. Like they made it was like very forced feeling. And
Yeah.
like Phil said, it didn't line up. Nothing about the movie aside from the characters really felt like Firefly.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching the first scene of it and thinking, "Oh, this is going to take some getting used to because it's just so different."
Yeah. Well, it was Mal insisting River came on a mission with them, and I was like, I just wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But still, woo, Firefly.
Yeah, woo Firefly indeed. I really would I'm very interested in the whole idea of them bringing it back with novels and comics.
Yes, agreed.
Like,
That
even
excites
though
me.
I don't like what they did with Serenity, I like the series and the world and the characters enough that I'm willing to forgive them for that and possibly dip my toe back in, even though I haven't yet because I'm still kind of on the fence. But I don't know. And I guess sort of to that end, are there any IPs out there that you guys are interested in, but you just haven't taken the leap to get into, or for Shelby, it's too much, it's too intimidating, or maybe you've seen people in the fandom and you're like, that IP looks cool, but I don't want to be involved with that. So is there anything like that for you, Soph?
Probably Star Trek. Yeah, I used to watch Voyager. That was like my thing as a kid growing up. That was me and my dad would watch it every Sunday night, and I loved it, and then never went back to it and just sort of carried on with my life. And again, this probably goes back to me saying I like the idea of lots of content, and it's a lot more sci-fi than Star Wars as well, which does
it's hard sci-fi.
Yeah, and that appeals to me actually as something very different from Star Wars. And yeah, there's a lot there. There's the new series that's on. It's on Netflix, isn't it? I think, but I just haven't got around to it. We tried to watch, was it Next Generation? We borrowed a box set off of someone, and it was just too dated to really kind of enjoy. But it is definitely it's definitely an IP that I feel has passed me by, and I would be interested to pick it up.
That one's in an interesting place because it lives in several different mediums, and they're all kind of self-contained. Like, you can watch the original Star Trek series and then skip forward like 3 series and still be fine. They don't build on each other necessarily.
No.
Kind of the same with the films. I remember we used to go to my cousin's for like a week every summer, and for whatever reason, he was like, let's go watch this new Star Trek movie. It was one of the ones during Next Generation when the Captain Jean-Luc Picard, I think it was the character's name. And it was something with the Borg, and I was like, okay, whatever. Cyborgs are cool. And I really didn't enjoy it very much, but I didn't not understand what was going on. I'd never really watched any Star Trek before. I haven't really watched much since. But while I was watching the movie, it was fine. So that's kind of a weird IP where like every little piece, it's kind of like the opposite of Star Wars now, where everything seems to be meshing into one interconnected story, where theirs is like very individual.
Yeah, because which I don't necessarily agree with that. You know, I don't like the thought that you have to have consumed everything to be able to completely get everything that goes on. And you know, like you say, I can just dive in, and so yeah, my only experience with Star Trek was Voyager, but I can jump into the films, the new films, you know, with Chris Pine and that, absolutely fine. And I watched the first series of, I watched the first episode, I think, of the Netflix series, and was like, yeah, boom, I'm in, you know. And I didn't need anything else to just kind of dive in. And I like that more than sat there thinking, oh, hang on, am I gonna have to get on Wikipedia here and find out, you know, what that is and what that is. But at the same time, they don't seem to spoon feed you too much either. But yeah, so I like that more than potentially where Star Wars is heading with this whole, you need everything to be able to understand the theme park ride that you're on, you know.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Shelby? Is there any IP out there that just really pushes your buttons, but you have been on the fence about?
I really wish I could get into Doctor Who, but there's too much, and I can't do it.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, except that I don't really want to. I feel like I might like it if I got into it, but I feel no actual desire to get into it. But so many people that I align with like it that I feel like it would be something that I would enjoy, but for some reason I just can't do it. What about you, Phil?
I have a few. American sports. Just because, like, we watch soccer over here, and you either have it on a Saturday, a Wednesday, or basically a weekend and one game in midweek. I've been trying to follow basketball as much as I can, but they play like 16 times in a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
never know who's playing when, and I like to be able to follow and see that result. But I don't know if sports is viewed in a different way in America. As I've missed out. I just catch the result. It doesn't really matter. Where I like to watch the highlights of the game and see who's played well and all those sort of things. Where it seems that there's so much content of like NBA that you can't possibly keep up with it.
Well, we have entire networks for our pro sports leagues here, so I, for example, will tend to just put the NHL network on if I'm doing work or anything that I'm not really paying attention to the TV. I just want it to be on. And they'll usually have a like highlight show that just loops. It might be an hour long, and it shows everything that happened yesterday, which is interesting with hockey. It's very similar to the NBA. Like basketball, baseball, and hockey, they play an extremely large number of games in a season. I don't know the number for the other two, but hockey is 82. That's a lot of games.
Yeah, I know the basketball at the moment. They're on like Oklahoma Thunder on like 38 wins and 13 defeats or something. So it's a ridiculous amount. In the Premier League, the football league, they play 38 games in a season, and that's it. So it's a lot easier to follow every single game and understand exactly what's going on. But I think it's probably because the sports broadcasters over here haven't got the grip of the difference between American sports and European sports, probably. But they're definitely getting better at it.
Yeah.
My other one is Rick and Morty.
Oh, that's definitely worth watching. It's so good.
It really is.
Just because I'm a big fan of Family Guy and American Dad, and I don't want to watch it and think, well, this isn't Family Guy or American Dad, because they're like my
It's so
favourite
much better
cartoons.
than those two.
Good. Okay. That's a good recommendation.
Hey, here's what you need to know. Rick and Morty are based off of Doc Brown and Marty from Back to the Future.
Okay.
Okay.
I will be getting on that then.
And yeah, it's like as highbrow and lowbrow mixed together as you can get in one animated show. It's really good. Really good. So what else? Anything else?
Yeah, I've lost my train of thought now.
I agree with Shelby as well about Doctor Who. I feel like that was one that the people who love it absolutely adore it. And
they have a cool name. You get to be a Whovian.
Yeah.
I want a
It seems
fandom where I get a cool nickname.
Yes.
Yep.
And I feel like it's such a big part of their life. Like when you're into it, it's such a big part of your life. And also the thought of like when the Doctor changes, and that's got to be a really big deal. And, you know, but I feel like it's the sort of thing that unless you were into it as a kid, it's almost impossible to get into as an adult. I don't know why I feel like that, but everyone who...
There's a lot of people who would be like, well, you actually need to start with this season and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so many people have so many like very
Different entry points.
rigid opinions on it too.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one of the ones that I low key don't want to get into because of the fandom.
Yeah. I think it's a mess.
Yeah, it's too much.
And then my other one, Walking Dead.
Oh, yeah.
I think that it could be something I like, but I've heard terrible things about the latest series, and I think it sounds a little bit like Suits, where something goes wrong, they survive, they move on until the next thing goes wrong, and then they survive. There doesn't seem to be any story to it apart from they're surviving. There don't seem to be much more than that, and that puts me off. And it puts me off that there's like 110 series of it as well that I couldn't catch up. But
Exactly.
it's got all the things I like. Well, I don't know about the sex, but it's got lots of violence in it. So, and zombies I like as well. So,
All right, well, that's actually a really good transition into what I was going to bring up next. So I'm just going to do it. The question was going to be, are there any IPs that you're not as interested in anymore, but feel too entrenched in to give up on? And Walking Dead would be that for me. I actually gave up on Walking Dead twice before I finally said, I really don't need to see this anymore. Like, I started watching it and I loved it at the beginning. It was terrific. And I think I got to about midway through the third season and I got behind on it. I had like 2 or 3 episodes DVR'd and I just found myself finding anything else to do. Like, I didn't want to watch it and I let it go. And then for some reason I binged my way back into it in season 5 maybe. I don't remember. And then I watched it again, and then I even brought Shelby in like to watch it with me, and I just filled her in. She didn't back watch anything. And we both at one point were like, this is not good. Why are we still doing this?
Everyone needs to ask themselves that question while you're watching something. To be completely honest.
Like, I think an episode like the second episode of not the most recent season, but maybe the season before, maybe even 2 seasons. I don't remember. It's been a while since we've watched it. But anyway, it was after the whole fiasco with Negan and, oh my God, who's he going to kill? The cliffhanger really turned Shelby off. But I was like, we got to watch it. See what happens. I think it was the second episode after that. We both looked at each other like, this is dumb. Yeah, dumba. And then we just quit watching, and we haven't, gone back since. But there was something with it where everyone was still talking about it, and I felt like I have to get back into this. I'd already spent so much time and energy on it. I need to see it through. And then, nope, dropped it like a bad habit and don't feel bad about it at all. So is there anything out there like that for you guys?
Two. Okay, I have two. The first one is Game of Thrones, the books, where I finished Dance with Dragons, and I swore I would not pick up another book by George R.R. Martin, because and then as that happened, I think season 6 of Game of Thrones caught up and then overtook it, and I was like, I like the direction they've taken it in. I prefer what they're doing with the characters as opposed to what George was doing with them. And then I'm at the point where I'm like, you know, if Winds of Winter ever comes out, I'd be like, well, I'm not picking it up because I don't care anymore about that, and I care about the series and where they're taking it. And yet there probably is a really good chance that I'll still buy the damn book and read it, because I've read 5,000 pages of this man's work, and there's a part of me, there's that little tragic part of me that's like, oh, but you have to finish it. So we'll see. That'll be an interesting day he probably won't ever publish that book anyway, and it will take this little problem away from me. But that is something that I just feel like I've ploughed through A Dance with Dragons, and part of me's like, you have to finish it. But then we wait another 15 years for the final one anyway. And like I said, Sansa will be a completely non-character because he basically wrote her out, and Brienne of Tarth would have been dead for the last 3 seasons. So that's one. And then the other one is a little bit more difficult to kind of sort of talk about and get my point. Like, just basically it's Harry Potter. In the extent that I obviously...
No cursed child for
the
you,
original,
is that what you're trying
the
to say?
books and the... Yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to say. And then I enjoy...
So Sherwood doesn't like saying bad things about stuff.
It's not...
I'm about to say a lot of bad things about Star
I'm conscious that
Wars,
what doesn't
so
float
get
my
ready.
boat. The thing is, what doesn't float my boat might work really well for somebody else. But, you know, I enjoy the Fantastic Beasts films, but they don't have that same spark or power. I'm not as invested in them as I was Harry Potter. And to me, The Cursed Child just needs to just be thrown in the bin, basically. And everybody says that, oh, you should go and see it, and it's amazing to see. And I'm like, but I fundamentally disagree with the story. I just, in a way, think once something is done, just don't mess with it. And that's why I do enjoy the Fantastic Beasts film, because they're sort of doing their own thing, weaving a bit into the... But I don't like retconning something. And this will probably chime in a little bit with you, Brian, what you're about to say in terms of, you know, with Star Wars, if you start to change things that happened that were so fundamental to the original trilogy, you are our only hope. Actually, no, there's quite a few. I'm not saying that it's realistic that every single Jedi in the galaxy is dead at this point. I'm sure there are plenty of Force users, but there's just some fundamentals that you start to tinker with, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. And that's kind of how I felt with The Cursed Child, where it's just like, oh, you're just going to go back in time and literally change the book then.
Time travel should just be like, if your IP isn't about time travel should be a hard no. You can't add it later. Like, Back to the Future is about time travel. That's fine.
Yeah.
Time turners were great.
Yeah. And then they destroyed them all because they were like, let's not have this as an option. And it's like, oh, actually, no, we're going to put one in anyway, because wouldn't it be great to have a Snape cameo on stage? And it's like, just don't do that. But like I said, at the same time, I will go and see every Fantastic Beasts film. And if more books come out, I will. Although I have to say, I don't feel that entrenched in Harry Potter that I will ever pick up.
I would go see it, I think. I don't like reading plays anyway, so I'm not going to read it, period. But I would go watch it, I think. Even though I think it was you that told me the plot and it made me want to puke in my mouth. But yeah, I'd still go watch it.
Yeah. It's bad times, but...
How about you, Phil? Aside from Suits, is there anything you've given up on?
Simpsons.
That got really dumb.
It's just gone too much. It was fun watching it at 6 p.m. on a Friday and on Channel 4 when I was 12, but why are they still making it, honestly? And DC superhero movies that are not Batman. They're just garbage that I don't want to watch. Aquaman took £1 billion at the box or something ridiculous. I didn't even realize it came out. They, with the way I think that Marvel have produced and made their movies and made them intriguing and mixed it up and done certain, Ant-Man's very different than Black Panther, which is very different than the Avengers, etc. I just think that they've gripped me where I think the DC ones are just dumb and I just do not get on with them. And I think Superman has had his day, and the kryptonite just needs to kill him.
I don't think Superman is very relevant anymore.
Yeah, the old Superman movies like Superman, Superman 2, they're very much, they're so dated and...
But they're of their time,
They're really, really of their time. Oh, yeah. Look, he takes his glasses off and he looks completely different.
Yeah.
It's just stupid. And nowadays, anyone would know, wouldn't they? And they tried to bring them up to date with, we've got new technology, we've got computers, etc. Blah, 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 but they've not gone past the extent of what we've got, and it misses a trick with me.
Well, also, I think people these days, I don't know, we've moved on from the time of wanting that perfect hero figure, which Superman really did represent. He was all powerful. And
he's
nowadays,
basically God, if you think about it. He comes from outer space and he can do anything he wants.
Yeah, and that was something that people really needed and wanted, and then we kind of gravitated towards, well, actually, no, we want someone a bit more real, a bit more flawed, and that's where then Batman was able to come through and shine.
This is what worries me about Captain Marvel. That if she comes in all singing, all dancing, can do anything, well, if there's all this trouble in the universe, why didn't she just come along earlier?
And you need that thing to relate to her as well, because I suppose that's the thing. But then Marvel are quite good at...
And that is why I think Marvel will make it doable.
But arguably Thor could have been, well, he's too perfect, he's too powerful, and yet they managed to make him, a very flawed and compelling character by giving him certain traits and quirks and taking things from him and stuff. Why are you frowning at me like that?
I would leave you for Thor.
My students actually asked me if I had any man crushes the other day, and I said Jason Momoa and Chris Hemsworth. And then they looked up. They didn't know who Jason Momoa was, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? And they're like, oh my God, it's Aquaman. You look like him. And I was like, you all get A's. What about you, Shelby? Is there anything that you've been into that you've had a hard time giving up?
Had a hard time giving up?
Mm-hmm. Or what about something that you just threw to the curb? Like me.
Oh my gosh. So, I know there's a lot of shows that I used to watch on TV, like American Housewife.
I think well, not necessarily long, but longer running, like Phil said with The Simpsons, things like that I think are easy to kind of just let go at some point.
Oh, you know what was really hard for me to give up because it was canceled was Downward Dog. I really liked that series, and then it just got pulled out from under itself, and I was very sad. What did I give up? Probably, like I said, American Housewife. I really liked it. It was funny, and I stopped watching it, and that was kind of it.
I think sometimes sitcoms
And obviously we talked about Walking Dead.
Yeah. Sitcoms are either just kind of there, or Big Bang Theory was like that for me. I used to watch that all the time, and then I just stopped.
Exactly the same. Yeah, that's a big one for us as well.
We got to season 8 or something, and then we just
no thought process involved. I didn't
was
consciously say I'm not going to watch this anymore. It just quit happening.
See, we actually did, didn't we? We both we almost sat down, didn't we, and kind of said I think we want to stop now. It just didn't. It was, wasn't it? It was it was a big deal for us where we were we watched a series that we just didn't enjoy, and then
it always used to be that Penny was the outsider and the boys were classed as the normal ones. And then it turned round and it just ended up being taking the mickey out of Sheldon, and Sheldon, Sheldon's got this quirk and Sheldon's got this, and it just felt a bit uncomfortable watching it with the change in people's opinions of, I don't know, mental health and behavioural issues that people have, and it just felt that it was just mocking him because he's different and he has these little traits and he does these things, and it just felt a little bit uncomfortable for me, and I just didn't get it. I thought it was losing its. I would sit there and be like, we watched some of the old series and I would laugh my way through them and then watch an episode and finish it and be like, I didn't laugh once in that episode, so if it wasn't funny. I just think it went that little bit too far.
And I thought as well, it felt like, you know, they were these incredible kind of, to me they were incredibly interesting characters at the start, and the jokes were always about the nerd culture or the science or something like that. Those were what the jokes were, and then as the girls came along, the jokes are all just sex jokes or kind of relationship gags or something like that, which is like, that's funny in a sitcom, you know, like Friends, when they would that's great, but that's not what Big Bang Theory was. And as a massive nerd myself, it felt like the message was shifting to actually get married, and then if your partner doesn't like it, then stop doing it. You know, and then it actually became you're odd for being, you know, sort of Howard when he got married, and it was like, well, you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't. And I was like, you should embrace the things that you're into. But I appreciate that's quite a personal thing to me because I am a massive dork, and it would be really sad if I was constantly being told, well, that's weird, don't do that.
Just do it anyway. Everyone out there, if people tell you you're weird, do it anyway. Do it more weird.
Exactly,
right?
like K-pop, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who listens to K-pop? No one. You listen to it and you like it. I don't take the mickey out of you for it.
Oh.
No, in fact, you embrace it. And
Some of us like
a
a guitar and a drum
Indeed.
in our songs.
Yeah.
Some of us don't. Some of us just like, I don't know, how many is that? Like 27 teenage boys dancing around in synchronicity.
Okay, and they're not teenagers either. A lot of them are in their 20s,
Yeah, it's good.
so it's
Oh,
fine.
No worries.
okay, that's fine, yeah.
So I guess to kind of round things out here, everyone go like what you like and don't like what you don't like.
It's okay.
And don't worry about it. Don't feel like you have to keep liking something that you've liked forever if you don't anymore. And I didn't end up tearing Star Wars apart, and that's probably a good thing.
Yep.
Well,
I
Yeah,
know.
Ryan.
that's very mature of you.
I'll let loose on Twitter later. No, I'm just kidding. I won't do that.
But
Oh
Rebels
my
wasn't
gosh.
good, so.
Wah, wah.
Okay, you
And that's our show! You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at PNE_pod.
Hit us up via email and tell us how much you love anything and why we should watch it, read it, listen to it, whatever. Hit us up at contact@podsandends.com.
And you can always find us on our website, podsandends.com.
Boom, boom, yeah. And that's the end. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Thanks, Phil and Soap, for being here. Thank you, Shelby, for sitting across from me. And thank you, most of all, audience members everywhere. Good night.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.